And we are live here on Youth Unfiltered. It's me, Jerome, with brother Valen. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Good. And we're continuing with the theme of what it means to be young.
Yeah.
And so today's live episode is going to be what it means to be young and free. I don't know when last. I know you're a father. And obviously you're a husband, so I don't know when last you were young or free.
Hey. Well, I still consider myself young because according to the UN, a young person is 18 to 35 or something.
Oh, okay.
So I'm still around there.
Yeah.
But free, no. That's something I haven't experienced.
Yeah.
For a very long time.
Especially from 8 to 9 when you have to read the bedtime stories. And
That's another story.
But knowing you, it's probably a review of the politics in the country with the daughter.
Well, those discussions can go in depth.
With the toddler daughter, I might add.
Yeah.
So, I think what's important when we speak about the word free, we've been speaking a lot, especially on last week's live show about what it means to be young. But the word free has two meanings. One means cost.
Yeah.
That cost you nothing. And the other means not in bondage.
Yeah.
So to do whatever you want. And it's important that as young people we don't confuse the two words. Just because something is free, just because you're free to do something does not mean that it is free. Meaning, just because you are allowed to do something doesn't mean there is no cost to doing it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, as young people, that's what we believe. We believe that freedom means it costs nothing. As much as we can be given certain freedoms in life, meaning we are allowed to do certain things, or we have the liberty to do certain things, nothing in life, or almost nothing in life, is free.
It's free.
Everything comes with a cost. So even for example, youth have in various ways and forms and in different eras fought for the opportunity of education.
Yeah.
So we have freedom to be educated,
but there's a cost.
Yeah. Even if the government is paying for your university fees or school fees, there's still a cost, which is your time, your effort, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
There's always there's free of charge. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So whether it's somebody's time, which is to be calculated, somebody's electricity. I mean, you walk into a shop and the shopkeeper gives you a free Coke. It's not free.
Yeah.
It's free of charge because there's ultimately he's going to have to cover the cost of it. So I think lots of times for young people, when they make certain decisions, they don't consider who covers the cost of their actions.
Right.
So, most times they'll do something, or young people will do something or make a decision, life-changing decision. For them, there's no impact, immediate impact. But sometimes it could be your parents, your guardians, your teachers, co-workers, whoever it is, that have to absorb the cost of that choice that you made. So, nothing is free.
I think even greater to add to that is also in a spiritual sense, we think that the opportunities we are given just to be in church, just to receive a word, just to be in youth meeting, and being a fellow youth leader, that sometimes youth, they don't understand that there's a lot of preparation and a lot of effort that went into it.
Yes.
But greater than that, greater than just us as youth leaders, whatever we might have put into the program, I mean, you've had martyrs that have died to give us that access to the Bible. And then you have Jesus himself who had to die to give us this opportunity to now receive the word in the way that we receive it now.
Yeah, when you don't understand the cost, you don't appreciate the value.
Yeah.
So that's important to consider, like you're saying. There's for a young person, it might just be coming to youth meeting. My youth leader is nagging me to come to youth meeting, and they not appreciate the value of it.
Yeah.
Because they don't understand the cost. When you understand the cost, then you start to appreciate every moment you can get together, or every moment that you're in church, or every opportunity that you will have to minister one day.
Right.
But I mean, it's like young people and their clothing. They appreciate their clothing items because they know the cost to it.
Right.
And then they'll keep it clean. No creases on your shoes.
Yeah.
Or they'll keep their phones safe because they know the cost of it. And the reality is some young people, or lots of people still go to church, but they don't understand the cost. And therefore the value is not appreciated.
Yeah. True. Yeah, so, am I also right in saying that, what we need to understand is that with every freedom, there is also responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the time we need to ask ourselves, when we're given a freedom, there's this excitement to just go and do.
Yeah.
But we don't stop and say, okay, what is the responsibility that comes with this freedom?
Yes.
Like, a lot of the time, when you're young, you get excited to drive.
Yeah.
And it's because it's your father's car or whoever's car.
Yeah.
But when you own your own vehicle, then driving is not so exciting because now you are responsible for the petrol and so on.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, with lots of freedoms, we have to be very real and understanding of the decisions that we make that comes with those freedoms, because it can either hurt people or it can uplift people. Right. I mean, if you got the freedom to go out, just say a young person has the freedom to go out, no curfew. Yeah. That doesn't mean that you should be coming back at 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, because your parents are going to be upset. They're going to be concerned. They might get upset. Things can. So you have to be very conscious of the fact that you are given any sort of freedom, but you have to be responsible with it. You have to take care of it, because some freedoms can be taken away. Right. And then as you grow into an adult, you will realize that the freedoms that you had as a young people is only to prepare you. It's only to prepare you to face other challenges. It's not just a matter of running free, like a dog that has been caged for right. And then you open the gate and it's got to be, because it can be harmful to yourself, let alone other people. Yeah. The decisions that you make, the relationships that you get into. So there has to be a great responsibility with every choice that you make, especially at that age. And
it's also important to ask yourself, when you feel you're in a situation where you don't have freedom, there's two extremes. You have bondage, where you're not allowed to do anything, and then you have rules. There's two opposites to freedom, and that is like rules and bondage. And there's two different connotations to that. So, like, a lot of the time, young people, every time you're told you can't do something, you feel like you're under bondage. Yeah. But it's actually a rule. And the difference is, bondage is there to keep you from progressing, and rules are there to protect you.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. Lots of young people will see it that way, that, my parents don't want me to go out. I'm a prisoner, I'm a slave, or I'm a prisoner in this. But it's exactly that. It's to protect you, because you, as a young person, and scientifically speaking, the faculty that controls your decision making or understanding consequences is not fully developed. Right, so you'll make a choice and worry about consequence later. Whereas an adult will think about consequence and then make a choice. So when they are putting out rules, it's not because they don't want you to experience things. It's because there are certain factors to consider. Number one, are you ready? I mean, is a 15-year-old ready to own a vehicle? Does that make sense? You don't have your license. Maybe you don't have experience. That doesn't mean you are not going to own a vehicle.
Definitely.
So young people most times don't consider the consequence. Therefore, they feel like they are being imprisoned. But ultimately, it's to protect them so that they can eventually experience certain things.
And, quite a silly example, but I'm sure you've seen it happen at least once. is I don't know if you've seen like Idol's wooden mic videos.
Yeah.
And when some people sing terribly, they ask him this question, you know, who told you could sing? And then they'll tell a story about, hey, you know what, my mother or my father didn't want me to come here today.
Yeah.
But I pressed against all odds to be here today.
Yeah.
And the next thing you're getting a wooden mic.
Yeah, look, and the reality is in life, the wooden mics are different. You know, the wooden mic could be a broken relationship,
Yeah.
be it with your parents, your family. A wooden mic could be losing a job,
Mm.
dropping out of school,
Mm.
or unfortunately, sometimes the wooden mic could be death.
Mm. Mm.
So we have to listen and just, you know,
Yeah.
sometimes, I won't call it blind obedience, but you have to trust.
Mm. Mm.
You have to trust the fact that your parents or your guardians or your leaders know,
Yeah.
you know.
And it comes back to, you know, we said that, you know, bondage versus rules, but also freedom speaks, you know, if you feel like you don't have freedom, you're thinking, what are my parents keeping me from?
Yes.
Or what is my leader keeping me from? But you don't ask yourself, what are they protecting you from?
Yes.
And that's true, you know, and sometimes we only see the pluses or what we want, but we don't see the minuses and what can harm us as well.
It's a matter of, I mean, perspective, but it's a matter of what lens are you looking at it through. You know, a young person is going to look at it through one lens, but if you decide to take your lens off and look at it from your parents' perspective, and as you grow older and you go into different seasons of your life, from being a single person, a teenager, young adult, married with children, your lenses start to change. I mean, same lenses, but you see things differently. But right now, I mean, for young people, it's just sunglasses.
Yeah.
You know, it's sunglasses. The prescription will change as you, physically and literally, figuratively and literally. But it's good to consider when somebody is saying, when your parents or whoever is saying no, to for a moment to change the lens and to look at it from their perspective. I mean, it may not be what you want.
Yeah.
Most times it probably won't. But it's you know, it's there for your protection.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, an illustration of what you're talking about now, you know, like your perspective and how you look at things, is I don't know if you've ever seen car chases.
Yeah.
And there's always a helicopter that's above the entire chase. Because when you're chasing something, you don't see an obvious danger, or you don't see an obvious avenue that you can take to catch what you're chasing faster, you know. And a lot of the times, you know, our leaders, our parents, they have a bird's eye view because they've experienced it. They've been down those roads before. They might have even drawn the map. And, you know, they saying, you know, take this left or take that right. Don't go in that direction. Don't, you know, it's okay if you lose the car for now. If you take the next turn, you'll catch up with it, you know, down the road. And you'll avoid certain dangers that are along the way. You don't see a dead end coming up. You don't see all of these hazardous terrains ahead of you. And so you need, not only when you're young, but all of us, we need people who have a bird's eye view all the time in our lives that can say, hey, you know what, I just noticed, maybe as you get older, you know, you are a bit more responsible for what you're chasing, but it's always good to even have good friends, good relationships where someone, you know, is confident to pull you aside and say, hey, you know what, I don't know if you noticed this, but I just wanted to bring this to your attention that I feel you're going down the wrong path.
You know, when you're too close to something, you don't see the whole thing, whole picture. When you are really close to it, and that's dangerous because there's a bias, number one, and number two, you're not gonna see. I mean, if you ever been to the cinema and sitting in the front row, you know, it's not ideal, and it's very uncomfortable, and you don't get to enjoy and see the whole picture. And that's I think for a lot of times, people are too close. When they're too close to something, that's the time they should be asking for a bird's eye view perspective of what it is. Because in most times, the person who's advising you will not be biased towards that picture and give you their honest opinion, honest advice. So in the same manner, when we have to, I mean, that will only come through time experience and wisdom.
Mm.
You know, and then eventually a young person will be able to will start to develop their bigger perspective or their view. But when you are too close, and that illustration, you know, of a car chase, you know, lots of times, I mean, all the time, obviously, the cars are on the ground, on the road. And you
unless you're watching Fast and Furious,
yeah, then you're on the moon.
then you need a space shuttle to give you a bird's eye view.
And then so you chasing, you following something, you know, and you're chasing after something, and the person with the bird's eye view is not chasing anything. He's there to give perspective. You know, so if you are busy chasing something, you're obviously going to have a bias towards that.
Right.
Your parent is not going to have a bias towards that. They're going to be like, ask you questions to make decisions, you know, unpack it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's very important.
You know, and when we look at the Word of God, you look at someone like Samson, who was given great freedom in terms of his capability.
Yes.
And I think a lot of the time, young people, especially in this day and age, having access to the internet, being able to teach yourself multiple things from YouTube, being able to even get an income of TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. There's certain gaming viewing sites that also, and you are given these powers or these freedoms that most young people don't have, or previously young people didn't have. And even if you have that extra edge, or you have that extra skill, or you have that extra power, so to speak, that others never had, that still doesn't necessarily mean you are ready for it. And that's what happened back then in the case of Samson. Is he had this extraordinary power as a young man, but that didn't mean that he was responsible for it. He still needed rules in his life. He still needed guidance in his life. And when his parents tried to move him in the right direction, he chose to still chase what he desired and what he had the power to have. And in the end, that freedom, and it's a bit of a ambiguous thing, you know, it's an oxymoron. That the thing that he had the freedom to get actually put him in bondage. You know, chasing what he wanted, freedom. In the end, he gets tied up. He loses his eyes, and you know.
I think that's very important, because many times we put on our own chains. So Samson didn't have to. I mean, his choices. You know, he would put on those chains. You know, there's a quote by a guy named Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He says, "Man is born free, but is everywhere in chains." Now, that's talking about the chains that we put on ourselves because of the decisions you make. I mean, when you come into this world, when you're born, you're young, you're an infant, you don't have responsibilities. But then as you grow older, you start to develop responsibilities. I won't call responsibilities chains, because everybody has the responsibility to take care of themselves, to take care of certain things. But then we go and burden ourselves and enslave ourselves by engaging in certain things, like Samson, that we're not supposed to. For example, we'll start to engage in company that we're not supposed to engage with or join. And then we'll develop habits that we're not supposed to have. Then we'll get into relationships, or get into debt, or walk down a certain path. And then we ask ourselves, why am I where is this bondage? It's because we put it on ourselves. You know, and then we want somebody else then to free us.
Oh, we blame somebody else.
You know, it's because of that person, because of this situation that I'm now bound and I can't break free. But at the end of the day, it's choices. Choices is that thing that decide that whether you're going to be cuffed or not. Because ultimately everything in life comes to choices. That fork in the road, whether it's a career move, whether it's family, whether it's anything, it's either going to be a choice that you make that provides the freedom to do something else, or it's going to be a choice where you're going to be bound. And especially during that time, that adolescent period, young people make
Right.
decisions there
Mm-hmm.
that as they grow older, they'll find
Yeah.
they're binding themselves, you know,
Mm.
they're enslaved, and then obviously they blame everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, if I'm hearing correctly what you're saying, and if I could sum it up, it's that, you know, if you're not responsible with the freedoms you have, eventually it puts you in a certain bondage.
Yes.
You know, like you mentioned, you know, like if you're not responsible with going out with friends, eventually you experiment with something that someone has
Yeah.
there. Next thing you have a bondage of an addiction.
Yes.
Or you might actually do something illegal and end up in a physical
Arrested.
prison, you know.
Yes.
And you know, also speaking about you know, freedom and having the opposite of rules, you know, as much as you know, freedom is amazing, rules are also amazing as well. I used this illustration before. It's like, imagine if you're playing Monopoly
Yeah.
and you could just buy anything for any amount, and
Right.
you could buy things without landing on the
Yeah,
street.
yeah.
And you could, you know, you can take a chance when you need to take a chest, you know, whichever.
Yeah.
Automatically, the chaos now takes out the fun out of everything.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's certain rules in life. You know, not every rule is there to be challenged and to be broken, because without it, it takes away the fun of everything.
Yeah.
You know?
Look, that's true. There's rules are there also to guide and to direct.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
to direct in a certain way
Mm.
because there's an objective.
Mm.
Now, if there's no rules, then
Yeah.
we won't, or guidelines, then we won't achieve the objective.
Right.
So, for example, in Monopoly or even in a soccer game, for example, or any sport, there's boundaries. You have
Yeah.
to play within the boundaries.
Right.
Previously, people were kicking the ball in a pigskin in the street
Yeah.
and running to the next town.
Right.
Right. So, in order to achieve the objective or
Mm.
accomplish the objective, there has to be guidelines put into place, or
Right.
rules.
Right.
Otherwise, the objective won't be achieved. And now, the objective of your life is your purpose to be fulfilled. So, imagine if there weren't any rules to guide you, you would just be wandering,
Right,
and then
right.
your purpose or that God gave you won't be accomplished, and then you're standing before God.
Yeah.
And then, you know, like Samson, he say, you did lots of things,
Yeah.
but you didn't do what I asked you to do. So that's the rule. Rules are important for that.
And a lot of the times, the rules that we do challenge are not rules that prevent us from building ourselves up.
Yeah.
It's rules that prevent us from enjoying our desires in the moment.
Yes.
And I think that's the difference between which rules to challenge and which rules to accept.
Yes.
Is that, you know, if I just don't like this rule because right now I want to do something that pleases my feelings, my taste, my
Yeah.
smell, whatever, any sensational thing, then, you know, that's a wrong reason to be challenging this rule.
Yes.
Unless it keeps you from doing something that builds you up, you know, that trains you, that educates you,
Yes.
that builds you in whatever, physical, spiritual, whichever way, then, you know, you've got some reason to say, hey, you know what, this is a freedom I should have.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time when you're young, the rules that we don't want to be there, the things that feel like bondage, is things that are just there to please our flesh.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's that momentary pleasure.
Yeah.
You know, it's now.
Mm.
And lots of times young people feel that if they don't get it now, they'll never get it.
Right.
You know? And that's why there's a rule that people under the age of 18 shouldn't get married. It doesn't mean you must never get married.
Right.
You know?
Mm.
There's a reason for that.
Mm.
Legally, emotionally, socially,
Mm.
mentally. So it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that you are prevented from advised to do something, not to do something now, that you'll never do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that desire or the flesh is speaking for now.
Right.
It needs to be satisfied now.
Yeah. And you know, there's a perfect segue to my next thought was, you know, sometimes we're so focused on certain freedoms that we don't have,
Yeah.
that we take for granted the freedoms that we do have that many don't. And I think COVID was one of those eye-openers that made us realize, hey,
Yeah.
there's certain freedoms that we have that we never appreciated.
Yes.
And now when we look back, okay, when we were in lockdown, just the ability to walk to the end of your driveway.
Yeah.
I think we never thought of what about kids that are or teenagers that are like child laborers.
Yes.
And that they can't go to certain places, they can't even have some time off or whatever it may be. And it didn't seem like a reality till you weren't allowed to leave your house.
Yeah.
And then you think, hey, you know what? I'm actually being kept in my house for my own good, but some people are being kept like this, or even being trafficked or whatever it is, for the sensation or the greed or the evil of somebody else, and I've never had to experience this before.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the time we take freedoms for granted because we're so concentrated on some feeling we want in the moment, and that we forget everything else.
And that's true. We even in our walk with Christ, we don't appreciate certain freedoms, like the ability to just get up on a Sunday and go to church.
Yeah.
Or leave that. I mean, the fact that we can sit here openly and have this discussion.
Yeah, freedom of speech.
And then read our Bibles. Whilst in some countries, people are smuggling in Bibles and they have to memorize the entire Bible because they can't have a transcript or they can't have a copy of it. Yeah, so those freedoms that we take for granted is, or not take for granted, but we don't really consider. It's there. It's always been there.
Right.
Nobody has ever stopped us. And when you're born in a particular generation, where like if somebody born now will not experience that type of limits.
And if I can just add to what you're saying, the examples that you gave now about things like reading your Bible, going to church, all those things there, those are not freedoms that we didn't have years ago.
Yeah.
Right now, there's people who don't have that freedom, those freedoms.
Yes.
To even sit and speak like there's people who don't have those freedoms now.
In many countries, I mean, and the sad thing is that, and it's human nature.
Right.
Even in COVID, you're told but some people will probably sit at home the whole weekend, not walk to the end of the driveway.
Yeah.
But because you are told you cannot leave, stay at home. Now you want to push the boundary. So if I hear you
correctly, we should be telling people you're not allowed to read the Bible, and you're not
that's how. If you look at it, that's how children behave. You tell them. So some parents are smart and be like, don't eat your vegetables. Now, but. So human tendency is to when you're told not to do something,
to revolt,
to try and push the envelope and then see what's on the other side. But even that came with our physical freedom of being confined during COVID, the lockdown. But that's why when people especially the young person, when he's told or he or she is told don't, they don't hear the rest of the sentence. They just hear challenge accepted. So, yeah.
No, and, speaking about freedoms that we didn't realize were there, the other thing is, what about bondages that we don't realize? There are bondages that we are comfortable with. That are detrimental, they're negative towards us. And we're just happy to be sitting in these bondages. One of which I feel is a major bondage amongst young people. In fact, amongst adults in general, children in general, is our electronic devices, our phones. I mean, all of us. Sometimes you take a teenager or a child to a park, and they don't realize it's the same as putting them in a cage in the park, giving them an electronic device while you're in the park. So
that's the thing. Like I said. Some people are born in a time where they not experience being without it. Like a young person now will be born and they won't know what it is not to live in an era where there's no cars, where there's no telephones and all of that. So when they so in it, and that's what they see, it's normal. So for a young person to go anywhere or to be in an environment where there's no device is not normal for them. And whilst a person, an older person might go to the park and sit there, and that's normal because they came from that. So I think those type of bondages, like, again, it comes with freedoms come responsibility. You have to know the time, the place, the context. You have to and that comes with maturity. And if you are mature, you will understand that device, which could be a bondage for one person, could be a tool for the next person. And that's only with wisdom and maturity.
Also there's things like relationships, peer pressures, social factors. We enjoy being in certain groups of people, but we don't realize what they're keeping us from. Like sometimes being in the cool crew at school is keeping you from the rest of your future, whatever career you might wanted to pursue, your ministry you wanted to pursue, just because you think it's uncool to be a certain way. And what we pursue as a freedom is actually a bondage. In that sometimes, like our parents see that, they say, okay, don't hang out with that group of friends. And you don't realize, but you're not chasing a freedom. You're chasing a bondage.
And you won't get to experience your life to the fullest, and accomplish your purpose. You'll be, there's so many dynamics that happen at play there, and then you'll end up living somebody else's life. And then you get older, and guess what happens? You start to realize, wait, I should have made these decisions. I should have, and then you live in that type of mindset of regret, and then you have your own family, and then you try to live vicariously through your children. Then you end up being in a place of like a midlife crisis, where you're like a 45-year-old, and now you want to be 16 again. So there's so many things. It's not just joining your friends. It's about considering what's going to happen 10, 20 years from now.
Coming back to electronic devices, even there we are under bondage, because it influences the way we think, the adverts that it plays to us to promote certain products, whatever it could be, marketing, distracting us, getting us to be stuck in our phones. These social platforms also, they shape and mold us according to what needs to be done by those who pay for these systems as well.
I mean, one of the things that I find amusing or funny is that people who believe that they are not influenced, and from where I stand, or my experience and my involvement in marketing and whatever it is, it's amusing because there's nobody on this planet that is not influenced by something or someone. If you're not, then you're probably dead. Trends change through the ages. I mean, we're not wearing bell bottoms today. We don't cut our hair in a certain way. You adapt, society, whether you like it or not. You're not wearing a robe like Jesus and walking around. Instead of walking with your donkey, you jump in your car. So trends change, out of convenience, out of, social pressures or whatever it is. But what is important to understand, that these influences around us, are they changing the trajectory of our lives from achieving our purpose or into going to a different path? Because those influences can either impact us positively or they can distract us. And, with social media, with adverts, with whatever it is on your devices, nobody just puts an advert out. Marketing companies, businesses, they don't just put out one ad. They understand the psychology of a human being. And
even the social media platforms, I watched something, I can't remember exactly what, but I remember let's say I'm obsessed with Valen. And a certain platform wants to promote Coca-Cola. So on my notifications on that platform, it won't promote Coca-Cola. It knows I'm a fan of Valen, so it promotes Valen. And when I click on that notification and it opens up a video with Valen, the ad that plays before you even say what you want to say is a Coca-Cola advert. Those maneuvers. Like you say, we think we're not influenced. And it even happens even if you want to watch something spiritual. It could be a pastor's message. but there'll be a certain product the
Yes.
advert plays before that, and you don't realize it, but it's influencing you too. Yeah.
It's very strategic, and if you really want to exploit that type of influence, you can't. It's not done once.
Yeah.
It's done a few times in small doses over a long period of time. Whether it's a small ad, 30-second ad,
All right.
6-second ad, 1 minute ad. But you go onto one social media platform, you see it there. You go onto another social media platform, you'll see it there. But you know, in that type of industry, it's not. You'll hear people talking about. It's not. If you want to understand, if you want to be good at marketing, you got to understand people.
Right.
And so marketers understand people and how they move, and that's why they're so easy to influence young people, because you know that trends change obviously, but once you understand a young person, you could sort of use the tools, provide the means to sway them. Now, if a young person is not, doesn't have a constant, you know, like that constant is Christ, and firm on that, then easily they can be swayed.
Yeah.
And even older people, so many older people are influenced to everybody for that matter, whether it's on a device, whether it's in church, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in your family. Once you understand what makes that person tick, I can say, hey, Jerome, let's do this. And then sort of like use the things you like to get you to go with the decision that I want to make. Right. And that's what influence is. So whether it's done on social media or done in real life, you have to have a constant. If you don't have a constant, then you are easily influenced.
You know, even as we're about to wrap up today's episode, there's a scripture that really stuck out to me when it comes to freedom, and it's Galatians 5 verses 13 to 14. It says, "You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free. Yeah. You do not, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one commandment: love your neighbor as yourself."
Yeah.
And important, I think, you know, we spoke about always ask yourself the question, when you feel that you don't have a certain freedom, you know, is it protecting you from something, or is it preventing you from something? You know, is it protecting you from what you feel you want, or is it preventing you from building yourself?
Yeah.
But a greater one, you know, if you have to fight for certain freedoms, is, does it just benefit me?
Yes.
I think a lot of the time young people are fighting for freedom that only benefits them.
Yeah. You know, I'm just thinking about on that point where something that only benefits them. And an example comes to mind. So in Pakistan, you know, there's poor communities, you know, rural areas or whatever it is. So a man or a woman will go for whatever reasons, whether they need the money for their family, or whether they need the money for drugs, alcohol, whatever it is, you know, they'll go and take a loan from a particular business. Now, that loan is for that time, for the person who took it.
Right.
But what happens is that loan with interest, it comes to a point where they're not able to pay it. But that's not the main thing. The main thing is when they have to work it out and pay back the person. But what happens is that person dies. So you're paying back the loan and you die. And what happens? Your son has to pay back that loan by working and giving their life.
Sure.
But guess what happens? His son, who's not even born, or daughter, is bound to pay it back when they are born.
Sure.
And work it off. Now, it's structured in such a way that you never, ever pay back the loan. So what could have been a temporary fix for that moment, you are now binding generations to come. And it's not something that happened like years ago. It's something that happens today in these red brick communities where people are making blocks. They're making, you know, pottery and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So when we're making a decision, young people are making decisions, they have the freedom to do something. It's not just for now, because your 2 or 3 generations from now, you could be binding them into something or enslaving them.
Now, in this vivid image that you painted for us, I think it's a very good illustration of how sin worked.
Yes.
In the beginning, from Adam to father, they even added on the bill of sin. And the wages, the only way you can pay it is with death. And so it was accumulating and accumulating and accumulating. And then you realize, hey, I mean, in that situation, if you've got this lineage that's in debt and they're working as slaves, and eventually someone comes along in that community and says, hey, it's going to be the end for this family to be slaves. That's what Jesus did for us with his own life. He came and gave his own life and said, hey, you know what, I'll give my life to pay this debt. And that's where, you cherish the freedom that we have on the spiritual side and through the gospel of Jesus Christ.
And you know what? Our one thing is important to consider: our physical freedom or the lack of it is only temporary. We have to look at eternally. The decisions we make now. Are we okay with being bound eternally? And a few freedoms that we can. Or not freedoms, the responsibility we take with our freedoms, the rules that we follow, eternally is going to be a different result. Or if we decide to throw caution to the wind and not take responsibility, we'll be bound forever. So would you like to be bound forever, or would you like to be free forever? That's the thing. But many times we look at now. So it's important to think about that.
It's been a awesome action-packed session, and in every session we have to end off with this football challenge. So we're not free of it yet, but we're just gonna spit a few things that we remember. Number one, you talk politics with your toddler daughter.
Well, not politics, but she loves the word discussion. So she said, Dad, let's have a discussion.
Number two, if your parents tell you don't go to idols, don't. You might get a wooden mic. Then also, there's freedoms we take for granted. There's bondages that are there that we don't realize that are there. It's generally we feel the bondages are only the voices that tell us don't, but there's social constructs, there's devices that are robbing us all the time of building ourselves. We also spoke about, in a moment when you want to fight for freedom, ask yourself, is it a freedom that just pleases me now, or is it something that builds me up? And later in Galatians 5:13-14, does it help others if I fight this? If it's just for something for me to indulge now, no point in fighting for that freedom.
It's not worth it.
We spoke about, the debt that had to be paid, with someone who acts irresponsibly. If you act irresponsibly with your freedom, there's a debt that needs to be paid. You gave that illustration, and that also falls into, on the spiritual side, what Jesus did for us when he gave us our spiritual freedom. So I think we've covered a lot.
No, it's I think the main point is that whole discussion is, with freedom comes responsibility. And you're not just responsible for yourself. You're responsible for others. No man is an island, and no generation is in existence without impacting the next generation. And that comes from our choices and our the freedom to have to make those choices.
So it's been an awesome time, guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed today's episode of what it means to be young and free. So we'll catch you on the next one. God bless. Have a great Friday afternoon.